going to change track and Vishpala, come back to you. I talked about the robots and the robo food. With humans working alongside robots, how do you think the role of HR will change in the workplace of tomorrow?
Yeah, interesting question. I think like robots are going to be like physical and non-physical, right? Like I'm not trying to get very technical because we all know like there are programmatic programs that will help and assist, and they are also robots, and there are physical forms of robots. Now for the ones that are going to be programmed, human beings are probably interacting with them via computers, right? Versus now, even if you look at your homes, and today you already have some robots that exist who actually come and help and clean like this particular room and this area. So how do you kind of help train yourself or your children or your domestic help to actually make use of those robots is probably going to look very different from today. So the reality, Amit, is I don't know. The honest answer is I don't know, but I think it needs to be a mechanism of coexistence, right? That's the key, because robots cannot exist without human beings and human beings cannot exist without robots. So as long as we get that equation right, the proportions could look and feel different depending on the situation. There could be situations where you have 10 robots to 1 human being, and there could be situations where you have 10 humans to 1 robot. So it's a very open-ended question, but as long as we can find a way to coexist, and I think we as humans have to probably take that lead to say, how do you coexist, right? How do you what is like that role that we would play versus they would play? But yeah, so it's going to be a world of possibilities and a world of dependencies. At least that's the way I see it.
I like that combination. Possibilities and dependencies, please.
Can I jump in? So I just want to add to that. I think one of the points, and in your introduction, Amit, you had said this about the pace of change is so rapid. What changed in over 50 years, now we see that same pace in a few months or a few years. I think so agility of learning for any individual as we grow forward. And to that point, our education system has to address that. How do we become agile? We cannot hold on to this, the age-old saying that "Hamare zamane mein ye hota tha, so it has to continue like that." That's not going to work, because within our zamana, within our time, things are going to change so rapidly that agility of learning and adaptability is going to be the biggest skill, biggest value, I would say, almost for individuals.
And I think just a practical example of like not robots, but look at personal assistants. What have they done to your households? Like I have children. Every time I ask them a question, they turn around and say, "Alexa, can you tell me this?" And I'm like, I asked you the question. So, we're already seeing that change of coexistence.
I'm a younger one who says Alexa's useless. She can't answer my questions.
I think it should be, "Hey Google."
I know, I'm going to come to you, but before that, Mr. Bakshi, I know you have a panel on gig tomorrow, and I'm going to steal a question there, so my apologies. But if you talk about innovation, workplace tomorrow, how can we not talk about gig? And I wanted to come to you, Amit. We've and open this to everybody, because customer is important for everyone. But how do, as an organization, we are able to bring in a customer-first focus in a gig workforce that I've heard across is going to be the future in whichever form or manner?
Yeah. So I think that gig is a very interesting concept, and I think we still have lots to learn as an industry. The reason why I'm saying this is the fact that traditionally, everybody talks about, I have a particular project, I need a FTE, full-time workforce, and most of the companies today are talking about driving efficiency. So I think first and foremost thing, we do have a lot of opportunities to leverage gig. The question which comes in our mind, and in fact we were in discussion with Swiggy, because they have quite an elaborate gig economy, just like Uber you have, is the fact that how do you ensure that you inculcate the similar kind of a value proposition that exists in a permanent employee, even in a gig workforce. So something which pretty interesting which came out as a part of the discussion was the fact that when I'm hiring or when I'm in discussion for getting a gig workforce in the system, first and foremost thing, they do definitely take into consideration the value system of the organization that exists, whether the gig person has that similar kind of a value system. So that's definitely comes into play. Secondly is that, gig people are typically in the field most of the time or outside the office arena. How do you ensure that you are reaching out to them in terms of developing their capabilities as well? So say for example, Swiggy does a fabulous job in this, I must admit, is that They reach out to these people through technology, through bite-sized learning, so that on a continuous basis, they are upgrading the skill set of the gig economy. That's point number one. Point number two is also the fact that most of their customer interface that they have is also linked to their variable component. So what has been the feedback of the customer that they're facing and they're representing the company, what they have to talk about the experience of the service being provided. And that somehow correlates to the variable component of the people. So in a way, you are able to navigate what you intend to do from a full-time FT vis-a-vis a gig workforce. I think these are a few of the things which comes in my mind based on the discussions. And of course, lots to learn still.
Yeah. Anyone who want to chip in before I move to Prasoon? Okay. Prasoon, I have a question for you. You know, we've talked about gig, and I don't want to go down that path more, as Mr. Bakshi hits me from there. But, how will an organization cope with desire of young people to do multiple jobs at the same time when we look at the workplace for tomorrow?
So the entire, the new organizations of tomorrow, workplace for tomorrow are going to be like that. No? The Gen Z we heard about, the more research we do, we find out that they don't like those routine or restrictive places to work. And it's important to create an environment where they can come out, say, express and work. For them, Mr. Narain was morning telling that money is important. It's to a level, but for they are looking up to fun and happiness of the workplace. So are we creating a fun and happiness of the workplace? Are they allowed to do something? Because they are not going to be one who is going to work on a desk for 6 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours. Are we allowing them to do multiple tasks? And they're asking for it. So one more example. While working in HR, I took 2 years into sales, and 2 consecutive years I was the best regional sales manager. And they came back. And while doing in this current role, the organizations we have to build to let people come out, express themselves, and take up responsibilities. And I've been, without me not being an academician, been given a charge of driving ASCSB, which is accreditation, which is the pure academic work for doing it and taking across all 4 campuses. It's important. Well, unless you tell people, give them chance, because at the times the idea which I have today may not be tomorrow. The things which I want to work today may not want to work something additional to this in a couple of minutes, a couple of hours, and allow them to work. Create a space. Yep.
May I add, with permission, the chair of the panel, I think when we look at innovation, we must recognize that there are 2 kinds of innovation. One is the incremental innovations. Unfortunately, for the radical innovation, which is the other kind, both are antithetic to each other. These air conditioners that we use today, they've been in here for 40 years. Only the air conditioners of 40 years ago are very different from today. These have grown very efficient. They use, programs, they use digital technology, they have become artificially intelligent, but the core technology of how to move the refrigeration cycle has remained constant and marginally improved. Right, so the air conditioner or cars or buildings, they would need incremental innovation. The other is the radical innovation. The digital technology has leveled quite a few of previous industries. Where will the radical change come in a Schumpeterian world where it destroys the previous industry, creates new ones, and therefore is unpredictable? And if it is unpredictable, how do you strategize? So these are 2 very different kinds of things that the organizations of tomorrow and of today face. And unfortunately for us, both need very different workplace. Integration, therefore, is the biggest challenge of the leadership. One will generate resources through efficiency, but they will not provide to the innovation, because innovation is shooting in the dark. And therefore, it's the leadership vision that actually ensures how to leverage these resources and move them into unforeseen future, even if it doesn't have justifiable basis of seeking those resources. So therefore, in my view, the workplace of tomorrow, a workplace that have learned to integrate both efficiency of incremental innovations and preparing themselves for experimenting on the sidelines to generate radical innovations that will support this in the future as well. So that's my thesis. Amit, so I'm sorry if I've created a little bit of a dissonance here, but
it's a great point, and I'm going to hold you on to that innovation piece and ask you. We've seen Byju's disrupt early learning or school learning. Coming from a management institute, what are the innovations you think will disrupt the academic learning of management institutions in the future?
So we are already experimenting with it. The fact that we created the incubator 2 years back, we got in 19 companies, we started 19, 3 failed. But 16 that have been successful, from robotics to artificial intelligence to sustainability, amazing mind-boggling ideas, they've generated far more resources than we've lost in those 3. So our IRRs are 33%, to be very honest. So what are we doing? So the academic institutions of yesterday are rote learning. They've learned and they are teaching. They don't give practical orientation or applicability to the concepts and the theories. So in the world of business, when we say, oh, that's theoretical or that's academic, we essentially mean it's all right, good to know, but it's not worth pragmaticism. And in the world of academics, when we say, oh, that's vocational, we say, oh, it lacks conceptual rigor. And therefore, the twain never meets. How shall we make the twain meet is the biggest challenge that all academic institutions of the world are facing. And so what are we doing? So what we are doing is that if you want to influence people or give them the capabilities to be entrepreneurial, well, put them into an incubator. Ask them to start a startup. So what if it fails? Because in any case, quite a number of them fail anyway. But that doesn't mean that you stop experimenting. So what the professor teaches in the class, the lab is there for you to go ahead and experiment with it, so that you can bring back the learnings from there back into the classroom, and the professor and the students both collectively learn. So that's a little bit of stuff. How do we apply the knowledge which the theories or principles teach us through a pragmatic basis? So that's something that we are, and this little experiment that we've done, it has proved itself successful. So next, obviously, Amit, that we would do, and which I'm sure other institutions would do, is provide these labs where you can test the social sciences or the theories that are being taught in the class, so that the students may actually build the skill and not alone conceptual knowledge. Skill, as I'm saying, is the ability to put that conceptual knowledge to practical use. Can we give it to our students? We owe it to them, because they're investing time, they're investing in, they are our future. So we have to do that, and that's the challenge which we are trying to meet. We're finding the progress a little tardy, but eventually we'll get there.
Great. I'm going to come to you, Prriti, and I'm again going to do my last change of track. And then I'll open it up for everybody, because it's the question that everyone has. What role do you think diversity will play in future of workplace, especially when we heard Suresh talk about diversity in the morning, and there's a huge focus.
So I think the first question for all of us is, what does diversity really mean? We define it in so many ways, be it by gender, and gender, just not binary genders across. We define it by race. But I think diversity is a thought process. I think diversity is about coexistence and flourishing of different thought processes in a room, in a group, and diversity is incomplete without inclusion. So unless you are inclusive, just having people, as the famous saying goes, just calling people to the party is not enough. How many of them are actually having fun at that party? How many are dancing in that party? That's what, together, both of them are absolutely essential with innovation, because innovation is about solving problems that real people like you and I face. And unless we are inclusive and diverse in that thought process, it will just cater to a very limited set of people. So I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, can I add,
Sure.
because we're talking all about the future, right? Like in my world of the future, like we shouldn't be talking about diversity, right? It has to be so ingrained into the way we talk and act. And I think to Prriti's point, like coexistence, we just spoke about it. It's human beings, it's robotics. You're moving beyond gender, you're moving beyond disabled, because hopefully you've solved for all of that. So I'm hoping there is someone there, while we're trying to make lots of corporate efforts, we're trying to do lots of societal efforts, but maybe there's something disruptive that will actually happen in the next 10 years where then we don't talk about diversity because it just becomes a part of us.
So I just agree to what, probably we were talking about diversity so far mainly in terms of male, female, girls, boys, but we passed through all this. For the generation which is coming, for them it's no, I mean, they are not bothered about it. I mean, they are already there. So they, in terms of diversity, in terms of sexes, is for them it's all acceptable. I mean, they would never talk about it, but they may, there are other ways, other means of making people who are at very diverse levels, because in terms of various other things, from the background, from gay, the new diversity, the other in terms of ability and disability. So I think the diversity, it has to be, as she talked about, Prriti, it has to be inclusive culture. So, and we will be talking about probably a decade down the line, nobody would be talking about these issues of diversity. There's some other issues of diversity, not these kind of diversity.
So just to add on, I would say that, the reason most of the companies today are talking about diversity and more so gender balance is the fact that the challenge still exists in the mindset of people, I would say. And that's one of the reasons why people are looking at research point, looking at, outcome of a particular example as to how diversity is helping them to organizations to grow. But the moment you talk about why most of the organizations today talk about diversity and more so on gender balance, multi-generational diversity, or culture, race, is the fact that there is a strong business value proposition which diversity brings, which we tend to overlook. And the people, why we talk about diversity, and most of the companies I pity, is the fact that they talk about, we need to improve our gender balance from, say, X percentage to Y percentage. No. We are being demeaning to, our women colleagues by saying this kind of a quota system. I think the challenge is on the mindset, and most of the companies today, progressive companies, are talking about unconscious bias, interventions to change that kind of a mindset. And that's one of the reasons why diversity has become such a big agenda. Otherwise, it's like business as usual.
Just a quick, Amit, sharing a small anecdote on diversity and then my thought on it, just a minute. So we were given the task of establishing the last IIM Jammu. So I had the privilege of establishing that institution. So we, in the traditional sense, instituted an award which traditionally used to be called as the best female student of the year. And this was the first batch. And the batch was about 60 students. And guess what? When we actually created the merit list, the top 3 were women. So then we went back to our academic council and proposed that we drop this award. We may possibly think of doing it for the other gender. But coming back to the diversity, I think academic diversity also. What skills, the diverse skills, So whether it's the classrooms of tomorrow or the workplaces of tomorrow, which should not have dominance of one functional group, because that will bring innovation. The radical innovation, unfortunately, is always found on the boundaries of functional competencies. When they integrate, it's cross-disciplinary, and therefore diversity, cultural, racial, gender, is pretty good. But what is also very important is the skill diversity, the functional competency diversity. That also, and the academic institutions have taken a lead in it. So there is, so that we have diverse people in the same class, not all engineers or not all CAs. We actually started giving weightage in admission to ensuring that diversity does come in.
So, Amit, there are people in academia who are for diversity, for different regions. We want skill diversity.
Absolutely.